100% Open has been going for 6 years and been doing open innovation crowdsourcing stuff for almost 10 years in total. So I'm a bit of an old hand. We've made all the mistakes. We've learnt lots of lessons. I'm going to share some of those with you today. But I thought it would be nice to have a fresh perspective from Sarah here at the NHS, who we've been working with very recently, together with a fantastic agency called Us Creates, who are also here. Give us a wave, Mary. Here's Mary. And so, yeah, we want to talk about everything but the technology. So the technology is wonderful, and I know there's lots of companies in the room that will sell you wonderful technology, and we work with many of those, and we'd like to work with others. But I think the success or failure of open innovation crowdsourcing is never about the tech. It's about everything else, and primarily about what's in here and what's in here. Anything you want to say before we kick off, Sarah? You happy? Okay, fantastic. So for those of you that have come to previous crowdsourcing weeks, they may have seen me do a little exercise called the birthday paradox, where I get everybody to line up in order of their birthday. I don't think this venue lends itself to that, but I would ask you to trust me that there's probably about 30 people, 20 or 30 people in this room that share a birthday with somebody else in this room, but you just don't know it yet. And if we got you to form a line, we would see that very quickly, but I'm not going to do that, but we've done that previous crowdsourcing weeks. And there are all these connections between us, whether it's our birthday or something more meaningful, which we just can't see, but the power of the internet means that we can start to visualize some of those connections, and more than that, actually do something kind of meaningful and interesting with those connections. So what I wanted to do, rather than get you to line up and create joint ventures, which is what I've done in previous years, I wanted you to, just in 3 minutes, I've got a timer here, I would like you to stand up, because these chairs are very comfortable, almost too comfortable. I'd like you to talk to somebody you haven't spoken to yet, so face forwards, face backwards, turn around, make sure you don't fall down the stairs. And I'd like you, hang on, before you do that, I'd like you to think about in the last 3 years, who were the people that inspired you most? Who were the influencers that shaped your ideas, your inspiration, gave you advice? And I'd like you, just in pairs, to talk about the one most surprising person on that list. You're going anyway. I want you to think about the most unexpected person that has surprised you in the last 3 years. Go, 3 minutes. Curious. So who talked about somebody that is a member of their family or a close friend? Can I get a show of hands? Who talked about somebody that would fall in that category? Okay, fantastic. Not as many as I thought, but that's interesting. Who talked about a work colleague, either a current or a former work colleague? Okay, about, I don't know, 30%, something like that. Who talked about somebody who you've never actually met in person? Oh, a healthy dose there. Oh, Sarah, you were one of those, weren't you? Yeah, fantastic. So that was more than work colleagues. That's interesting. And who talked about somebody who doesn't know you exist yet? Quite a few people. Okay. So Daniel, can I pick on you? What was that? Who was that? Or the person you hadn't met yet?
Eric Rees.
Eric Rees. Okay. So inspiring person that you follow on social media or something? Yeah.
Yes. So he started Lean Startup.
Yeah, Lean Startup, of course. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, so I guess the point I was trying to make with that little exercise, other than just to get us out of these extremely comfortable seats, is that sort of good ideas, inspiration, advice are literally everywhere and not necessarily where you immediately expect it. I was just telling Sarah, the person I chose is somebody I met very randomly. I have met them in person, who has all kinds of challenges in his life, but in a weird, he's just a fount of wisdom in my life, and so but somebody I didn't know 3 years ago, and but it's been a very important relationship for me over the last 3 years, just to get to know him better and share some of some of what's going on inside my head and my world as well. So, so the other thing I just wanted to kind of quickly do before we dive into some of the other content is the fact that we're so connected in this room with our birthdays, and inspiration can come from anywhere. I'd like to harness, we've got about 100 people here in the room. The network power of 100 people in a room is really phenomenal, and we barely scratch the surface of this kind of network potential. But that's what crowdsourcing and open innovation is all about. So I want to be very selfish and ask you a question, and then I want to see if anybody else has got a selfish request and see if we could help each other. So is there anybody in particular whom it would be helpful for you to meet right now, some kind of personal or professional project or kind of problem that you're grappling with, where some specific named, or possibly you don't know their name, that an individual can really, really help you? So for me, I'm going to go first to give you a second to think about it. It would be the Chief of Transport for the Mayor of New York City. Does anybody know that person or anybody who might work in that field or domain working in transport in New York? Anybody? Anybody live or work in and around New York City?
That's a good starting point.
Okay. Anybody who works in public transportation world or knows that? Yeah, okay. Thank you for raising your hand. Okay. So nobody can help me with that particular request. Does anybody have anyone specific they want to get to that we can help each other? Any named individuals? Please raise your hand and shout it out. Who's got somebody they want to get to?
Bono.
Bono?
Yeah.
Okay, you're aiming high. Why do you want to meet Bono, please?
Because he wants to send comics,
Okay.
comedians,
Yep.
to the Middle East to go and liberate women.
He wants to send comedians to the Middle East to liberate women. Does anybody in this room know Bono? Does anybody in this room know anybody who knows Bono? Oh, we got a connection. Please, could you stand up? And can you talk in the lunch break afterwards? Oh, yeah. Well, do you want to tell us how you know of somebody who knows Bono?
I know the founder of Web Summit, and Bono comes to the conference every year. So
Fantastic.
I can introduce you.
Fantastic.
Okay, it worked. Woo! Okay. I think I'm going to quit whilst on that one because I didn't think we'd get to Bono. We couldn't get to the Chief of Transport in New York, but we got to Bono, so that's pretty good. So we're literally just a conversation away from pretty much anyone, anything, everything, but it's pretty overwhelming, and I think that's one of the things that we need to get past at events like this and kind of with crowdsourcing and open innovation. There's so much potential, even in a room full of 100 people or an online community of 100 people, that sometimes you just don't know where to start. So I'm now going to gracefully ask Ginger Rogers in heels and backwards to tell us a tiny bit about the project that we did, and in particular, how did you feel before we started? So talk to me about your emotions, Sarah, before we started the HealthWorks project.
Sure. So I work for the National Health Service, and I work in a transformation team that has an overarching ambition to make London the healthiest global city. And within that, I'm looking specifically at workplace health and how can we make work a healthier place to be. And representing the NHS, I'm starting to think, how can we start sort of some social momentum towards workplace health within each NHS organisation? So we started to play with the idea of crowdsourcing, which is how we came in contact with Mary and Roland. But crowdsourcing's super new to the NHS, as is social media and the idea of having conversations about workplace health. So when we decided we were going to do this project, which we called HealthWorks, I had two sides of a response. One being, wow, I get to do something really cool in my work. And it's really exciting that the NHS is ready to look at this. And then on the other side of it, that's completely daunting because I don't know anything about tech stuff. Yeah. And it's quite scary to think about, because this is a really nice point where design is starting to take off in the NHS, that puts a lot of pressure on to kind of get it right. And we decided to start with a small pilot, so we got 30 organisations on board, and then I quite quickly felt daunted about the fact that I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen online, and it was a pretty big thing for each of those organisations to stand up and say, actually, we're willing to hear from our staff about what it's like to work here and what they'd like us to do differently or we could do together. And I had no possible way of reassuring them about what was going to happen. All I could kind of do was acknowledge with the leads of each of those organisations, that this was about pretty much everything except the tech side of being online and staff being online together. It was actually saying, are you ready to listen to your employees, and are you really ready to create with whatever it is that they put forward?
Fantastic. So we'll tell you the end of the story a bit later, but excited and scared, I think. Has anyone else felt excited and scared before the end of a project? At the beginning of a project? Can I get a show of hands? Okay, if you're not feeling a bit excited and a bit scared, then I sort of challenge you, why are you doing it in the first place? But I think that's not uncommon at all. And the NHS, I don't know if this is actually true, is famously the third largest organisation in the world after the Indian Railways and the Chinese Army, or the other way around, I can never remember. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but it's certainly a very large organisation. So actually, I don't think it was a small thing we were doing. It was a big thing, but in a much bigger organisation. So I'm just going to quickly rustle through some learnings from an old hand, that's me, and then I'm going to ask Sarah to tell the end of the story once I've done my piece in terms of how it all worked out. It all worked out well in the end. I'll give away that, but anyway, I'll say a bit more. So number one, everything big starts small, go in bursts. I think one of the challenges with some of this stuff is people try and recreate, rightly or wrongly, persistent, permanent structures and communities that are potentially everlasting. I think that's a mistake. I think the best thing to do is to do a little burst. In HealthWorks, it was 5 weeks. In some of the other examples I'm going to talk about, it was a few months. But I think a network will come together for a period of time when it's useful to them, but then they will also dissipate when that kind of use has evaporated. These are not permanent structures. Networks and communities aren't permanent structures, and we shouldn't try and create them as such. That's a bit of an issue for the business model of many technology providers who will try and sell you in the coffee break an ongoing persistent license, which is the predominant business model. I think we need more creativity around the business model to allow more bursts of action and crowdsourcing to happen. So I'm going to start with the biggest thing we've ever done, which was pretty scary, but also exciting. It was a project for UBS, the global bank, last year called the Future of Finance Challenge. It was a startup competition. We ended up working with companies from 52 different countries. I know I said everything big starts small, but for UBS, this is, they like to do things well, and they like to do things at a global scale as a global bank. But the reason why I use this as an example to reinforce the point I was just making is it was an intense burst of activity over 3 months across the globe, inside the bank and outside the bank. It required a huge amount of effort within the team at UBS and the 100% open team working on this. But it was, I think, by having the momentum and and having a clear end date to aim for and a big, hairy, audacious goal, which was to reinvent the future of finance, that helped us drag through and get over any bumps in the road. There weren't too many, but there's glitches in any kind of project that you may be faced with of this type. And so we ended up with 600 odd applications. There was quite a nice prize pot, but it wasn't all about the money. It was about the learning. And it's led now to 21 joint ventures between UBS and 21 kind of tech startup companies from around the world. If you want to check it out, I should have put the URL on here. It's ubs.com/innovate. And I think one of the things that was so important about this was the fact that it was a sort of a rapid sprint, not a kind of persistent thing, though we are talking to them about some kind of sequel, so watch this space if you're interested. The second point I wanted to make is online is great, but it's all about getting in a room together with people as much as you can as well. I don't think, even though about half the people, when you chose your most influential person, had never met them before, that surprised me. I thought it might be less than that, but obviously we're drawing so much influence from social media and other sources these days. But I still don't think you can beat the shortcuts that you get by talking to people in a room together. So Unilever's already been talked about. We've done a lot of work with Unilever over the years. And actually, Unilever, it's not so much crowdsourcing. It's online and offline workshops. So it's getting people in a room together just to kind of solve problems and develop new kind of concepts and prototypes and ideas. But also, we use a great platform called Evate, which is a sort of online innovation workshop environment where you get between 20 and 100 people all contributing, brainstorming, post-it note, prioritizing, whatever, and it works really, really well. We have done a bit of crowdsourcing with Unilever through Better Ventures, who I think are in the room or they're talking this afternoon. So Unilever and the previous speaker earlier also talking about Unilever do this a lot. But I think also HealthWorks, which you'll hear a bit more about in a minute, we tried to have some face-to-face engagement as well as the online engagement. I think the two reinforce each other very nicely. So I would always kind of actively encourage that, even though it's hard, obviously, to travel people around the world or whatever it might be to be in a room together. The third point I want to make, and this is coming back to HealthWorks, maybe Sarah, you can say something about this, is around the diverse perspectives being equally heard. Two things which seem to be universally true of the success of any open innovation crowdsourcing initiative is the percentage of women involved. Women are naturally more collaborative than men, and it's been shown through some of the MIT collective intelligence work that was also referenced earlier that the percentage of women is directly comparable to the productiveness of innovation online communities. women are much more likely to talk outside of hierarchies and across silos in organizations as well. Some very interesting research around that. And secondly, again, it's something of a gender thing, but most online communities and most face-to-face events have a few dominant individuals like me right now hogging the mic, but having equal participation from different people on an online community or on an online process is the number one thing that you want to try and engineer. So whenever you do a brainstorm, make sure that you do it silently first and everybody answers the question on their own before sharing their answers. It's not a known fact, but it makes it much more powerful. So this is the HealthWorks platform. Maybe, Sarah, you can say a few words, but here's Sarah handing out the prizes to the winning CCGs last week. Sarah, do you want to say a few words to build on what you've said already about HealthWorks?
Sure. So we managed to get 29 out of the 32 similar organisations in London online, and some of the comments that people were saying is, wow, we've never met each other face to face, but we can talk to each other here. And what was really important was sort of a senior lead from each organisation sort of making it okay to be online, and from there we saw that when people got online and saw that others were talking, it was actually okay. We saw an increase in contributions. The site pulled together 9 top ideas and then we brought people back together to discuss how they might be implemented. So we now have sort of this online pilot, which we've now got a demand to roll out more widely, and we have an offline group that want to keep working together to put into place what the ideas were that came off the site.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. So we'll hear the kind of end of the story in a moment, but again, this was a piece of work done with a very interesting design agency, Us Creates. And I think there's just a nice coming together of the design world, the innovation world, the crowdsourcing world, which is quite an exciting time, I think, especially in London, but elsewhere as well. So just 2 more points. This is probably the most complicated, but the easiest way to say this is online is all about getting together live. You know, Twitter really comes to life at live events, the World Cup, whatever it might be. And so I think sometimes crowdsourcing is thought about, it's great, it kind of builds on the persistent communities versus bursts point I made earlier, but try and engineer, if you can't get people in a room together to bounce ideas off each other, have a kind of 48-hour over a weekend burst of activity, which is much, much more powerful than having a sort of drawn-out conversation over a matter of weeks or months. So I just want to big up some very interesting work done by Nathan and his colleagues at IDEO.org that we've played a tiny, tiny role in, a program called Amplify, which is funded by UK government, Department for International Development, running big kind of global challenges, 10 of them over 5 years, and extremely interesting process, but combining, I think, in a really rich way, the online kind of crowd power of the crowd, but also lots of post-it notes, workshops, ethnographic investigation on the ground in different countries, and kind of making the best of getting together at the same time versus the power of the network and the crowd over time. So talk to Nathan or myself if you're interested in some of that work. And then last but not least, crowdsourcing open innovation. Often, for those that go about it the first time, and this is definitely not you, Sarah, but other people sometimes think, oh, I can get something for nothing here. It's a kind of a shortcut to otherwise the other way in which you might innovate. But I think that is a misnomer. I don't think open innovation crowdsourcing is any easier or harder, for that matter, than doing it all yourself. And there's no substitute, as it says here, for just bold ambition, transforming the future of finance, transforming workplace health, whatever it might be, and sheer hard graft. It's bloody hard work, and there's no, you can't hide away from that. But if you want some help, then I know a very good innovation agency that can do that. So probably the best example and the thing that we're most proud of having been involved with, and we haven't actually been involved for a number of years, but there's a fantastic company called Chaotix who are in the room. Give us a wave, Chaotix. Hello. Who now run this Lego Ideas platform, which is now about 1 million people or plus co-creating new products. You post an idea, you get 10,000 supporters, it goes into a review process, and if it passes the review, the product gets shipped, and those products almost always sell out. It's a very, very good business model. They market the product before they build it. It's a counterintuitive way of innovating kind of a product. We were at a very early stage, ran a kind of 200-person community, a little bit like the HealthWorks community, in fact, using the same platform, which I should big up Crowdicity, who are also in the room and talking this afternoon, with whom we've worked lots of times as well. We ran a small pilot with 200 people. It's now, 5 years later, 1 million plus people, and an incredibly successful, robust business model. So this is my aspiration for where HealthWorks could be, albeit a completely different sector. I think you can get there, but kind of everything big starts small. So I'm going to shut up now. I've been hugging the mic. I think I'm over time. Sarah, do you want to make any kind of final comments about what happened and the lessons that you learned from the HealthWorks community, please?
Sure. So the point that we've got to is that I think the hard work really starts now, because we had a little test online and now there seems to be a demand to make it go bigger and also to really embed what came off the site. But I think it's taking having a slightly ridiculous ambition to kind of help people buy into what we'd like to achieve together and be part of something bigger than themselves. I think we learnt from the site itself that we'd actually share more of that ambition with the people who would be using the site as well, so that it's bigger than just who was online at that point in time. I think the burst of activity, we had really strict parameters, but the NHS is a really cumbersome beast to kind of move, and the fact that we had a deadline and a finish date meant that people got themselves in order, got online and really enjoyed it, and now we're in a point where we can ask for more. And I think the final point for me is that it still continues to be about how I support people in our networks, online and offline, in order to help work towards things together. The online stuff kind of came easier, but the amount of support and thinking through and process to actually make real value from what was generated online, I think is the real challenge moving forward.
Yeah, it really felt like there was a kind of relief that people had been waiting to have this conversation, and it allowed them to have that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Summary? Yeah.
I think so. It's sort of people, there's sort of a small group of activists that thought that that's their thing, and now we're making it more widely available that this conversation can be for you too.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. So just a quick plug. I'm nearly finished, I promise, Epi. So we launched 100% Open 6 years ago, and we've been running on the same website, albeit updating the blog and the case studies, but apart from that, it's been the same website for 6 years. I'm extremely proud and pleased to say that yesterday at 5 o'clock, we launched our brand new website. I think it looks gorgeous. Please check it out, www.100open.com. On that, if anybody's interested, there are about 40 different tools and techniques. They're all free for you to use. And some of them are things that we've invented ourselves. Some of them are things that we have learned and drawn inspiration from other people. And if that's the case, we cite the source. The one that we were plugging yesterday, and I've got some little flyers here which you can take if you want to take a look, is if you're perhaps like Sarah was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, not sure whether this was right for you and your organization, and you want to just assess where are your strengths and perhaps relative weaknesses around what you need to do open innovation crowdsourcing successfully. We have a little open organization test. It's 40 questions, takes 5 minutes to complete, and it gives you a little kind of diagnostic and a little report. We've been trialing it and testing it with quite a few organizations recently and getting some really rich data from that. We'd love it if people in this room feel like doing the same and testing it, and give me a call. So I think that's all I was going to say. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Epi. Thank you, guys.